Good evening, everyone. You're watching Vintage Motocross Q&A, and I'm your host, Joe Abadi. Don't forget to keep sharing the show, whether you're on Facebook or you're on YouTube. We'll have some gifts to give away. Go back to the page tomorrow, and you'll find out who's won some prizes. As always, I want to thank our sponsors, Motion Pro, Vinco, Full Circle Racing, Replica Motorcycle Parts, the International Motocross Museum, Racer X, and of course, Preston Petty Products. My guest tonight hails from the great state of Oklahoma. After moving to the West Coast in the mid-'60s, she and her husband, John, got involved in desert racing. From a trip down to Mexico, where they discovered some thick wool socks that they thought the racers might enjoy, they began selling those goods out of the back of their car. That little venture soon became something that was absolutely bigger than anything we'd ever seen before in the clothing industry and motocross, something that we know as JT Racing. It's my pleasure to have as my guest this evening, AMA Hall of Famer, Rita Gregory. Rita, thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me, Joe.
That is quite a story about how you just all got started with some socks in the back of a trunk and some desert races. We'll get into that. But during my introduction, it did say all the way from Oklahoma. And I'd like to know what was life like for you in Oklahoma back during that time? I mean, America was a simpler place. Tell me about your family and what life was like there for you at that time.
Well, I was a farmer's daughter, and we lived on a 160-acre farm, and we grew wheat and cattle and pigs and chickens and turkeys and all of those things. When it came to money, we didn't have much at all, but we had a lot of love, and we had our faith, and we had plenty of food. We made most of our own clothing and some of our bedding, and we grew up working, and summer and winter. I mean, when the other kids were in town riding bicycles, I was either chopping cotton or helping mother can fruits and vegetables for the winter. So it was a working life.
Children.
I'm sorry?
You were one of how many children?
5.
Can you hear me, Rita? You were one of 5. Okay.
Yeah, it's breaking up. There were
So
4 girls and 1 spoiled baby brother.
And the gardening, the chickens, it sounds like, well, it sounds like something you'd read out of a book. That's for sure. Eventually,
it sounds like a different generation.
It was. I mean, this was post World War II, obviously.
Mm-hmm. For me, it was post World War II. For my older sisters, it was
again
pre and during.
Yeah.
I think we're breaking up.
Can you hear me now? Okay.
I can.
Okay. You became a lifeguard at an early age in Oklahoma. What led you to that?
John Gregory.
He did.
Yeah, he was the lifeguard, and he had been a lifeguard before he moved to my hometown to pharmacy school. He had been a lifeguard in New Mexico, and when he came to Weatherford, he got a job as a lifeguard. And that same year, my girlfriend had been working the year before in the facility as a basket checker, and she got me a job as a basket checker. Mm-hmm. And that was a better job than the job I'd had the summer before, which was chopping cotton. So I got to work at the swimming pool. And during that time, John and I got to be friends, and he decided that I needed to become a lifeguard too. So the next summer, he encouraged me to take a class, and I became a lifeguard.
What was a basket checker, Rita? What did you do at the pool? What's a basket checker?
Well, at a public pool, they come into the counter and they either have a season ticket or they pay, and then they have to go into the dressing room and dress, and they put their street clothing into a basket and check it with a key and clip the key to their swimming suit and put their swimming suit on and go out and swim. And then when they get through swimming, they come back with their key and they get their clothing and go home. And so I was the gal at the counter that took their clothing and filed it away.
Okay. So when you this lifeguard thing and working at the pool, how soon after that did you both decide you were going to pack up and move to California? Long way from Oklahoma, completely different life than living on the farm.
Well, that was probably 2 years later, 2 or 3 years later. I think 2 years later, actually. John graduated from pharmacy school, and I was at the end of my freshman year in college, and he had decided he was going to Cal. That was what he used to call it. But before he did that, as soon as he graduated, he got my dad to co-sign a note to buy a Corvette. So the only way we had to go to California was in this hardtop convertible Corvette.
Right.
And all we could take was a few sleeveless blouses and pairs of shorts. And I think we took 2 knives, 2 forks, and 2 spoons, and we stuffed them under that place where you store the hard top.
Yeah.
And took off. And, you know, I'd hardly ever been out of Oklahoma in my life. And I thought, okay, sunny California, I'm not going to need anything. I just take my sleeveless blouses, my swimming suits, and my shorts. Well, we get to California in May, and it was cold. And I nearly froze to death. And I ended up having to have my mother send some of my jackets and pants. And I nearly froze to death that first time. I learned very quickly that it's not always warm in California.
No. And like that old song says, a lot of people ask me that too, or will say, or we'll quote that song, "It never rains in California." Yeah, it does rain in California, and it gets cold here too at times.
Yeah,
So,
I tell everybody we have our winter at night because it's a desert.
Yeah.
It's a desert climate, and when the sun comes out in the daytime, it's beautiful, and then when the sun goes down, it gets cold.
Yeah. I just want to thank one of our sponsors, ReplicaMotorcycleParts.com. Paul Parkinson Sr. Replicate just about anything you need for your vintage motorcycles. And he's got a big announcement that he just made. He's making silencers now for 1973, 74 Honda CR 125 and 250s. Get a hold of him at ReplicaMotorcycleParts.com. My guest tonight is Rita Ruth Gregory. We're talking about her excursion from Oklahoma all the way to California. Rita, after you got to California, was the pharmacy thing something that you were involved in too? Or did you just go along with John thinking that we're just 2 kids in a Corvette, we're going to fall in love and move to the West Coast?
No, we were married.
Oh, you were married at that time?
Okay. In Oklahoma, we didn't do those things.
No,
we were married.
Okay.
So actually, I hadn't decided on a major at that time. And most likely, if I would have been left to my own devices, I would have probably majored in math or music or something like that. But John encouraged me to become a pharmacist. And looking back, I think he just wanted a relief pharmacist so he could go ride motorcycles. That's a joke.
You just mentioned you just mentioned music, Rita. What did you play an instrument, or you like to play the piano? What was your love for music about?
Well, I was a singer for many years, and also, excuse me, I have allergies. I was a trumpet player. In fact, I was the third trumpet player in the all-state band of Oklahoma. Third seat, third chair. In all of Oklahoma. Trumpet. John called me Hot Lips Reeds.
The piano, maybe even a harp, but I didn't see trumpet coming, that's for sure.
Well, at all the football games, I was the girl that played charge. You know what that is at football, right?
Oh, yeah, yeah, sure.
That was
Yep,
me.
I do. Rita, we're going to take a little commercial break, and when we come back, well, I certainly have some more questions for you musically, motorcycle things. There's a whole lot more coming up with Rita Ruth Gregory. We'll be right back. In tonight's Moto Showcase, we take a look at a 1970 Harley-Davidson MSR Baja 100. This bike
Motocross struck America, coming from Europe like a lightning bolt, striking the hearts and minds of people all across the country and the world. Battles of intense racing and cutting rivalries with loyalty to brands and heroes intensified as years of blood, sweat, and dirt flew through the minds of those memories of champions as they wrestled their machines through almost impossible tracks. But where are those past champions? And where are their bikes? Terry Good, an ex-pro motocross racer, has made it his life mission to honor these heroes and the bikes they rode to stardom. We raced, we rode, we lived and breathed motocross. Go back in time and relive those moments, now preserved for the first time ever in the world's first museum dedicated to the history of motocross. Our new building is in the gate. Help us get a great start and you can be part of history. Go to internationalmotocrossmuseum.org and become a part of our team.
We are back with Rita Ruth Gregory. We're talking about JT Racing and how that company came about. And I guess really, Rita, it came about because John took an interest in desert racing. Were you a part of that? Did you go along with him to those races? And tell us a little bit more about that.
I didn't start out going with him because at the time I was studying at the University of California at Riverside. And I remember I was taking microbiology, which was a tough class. And the first race that he went, there was a Honda dealer named Floyd Burke who took John with him. And John went by himself in our El Camino. And it just happened that at that time, he got injured and he had to drive himself home. And so I felt really bad about that. So I always went with him after that. Sometimes I would study in between laps around the Hare and Hound. But yeah, I went with him from then on and met a lot of really great people.
Now, the initials JT, I've asked John about this, and a lot of people do know. You happened to find some socks that you thought would be beneficial to the desert racers. It happened in Tijuana. You didn't want to use the initials TJ. Is that how it goes?
Yeah, because at that time in San Diego, there were a lot of ships in the harbor, and the sailors used to go down there and participate with some not very nice girls. And I didn't want to be known for TJ. I didn't like that idea. And so he flipped it around. He said, well, what do you think about JT? And I said, well, that's fine. I don't care. So John came up with that. That's how it happened.
So you bought some socks while you were there, and you came back to California and just offered them to the riders, or you had a bundle of them that you sold? How did that start?
Well, when John was racing in the beginning, there were no products in the desert specifically for motorcycle riders. They were wearing leather pants. Some of them were Bates leathers. Some of them were Torsten Hallman. They were wearing telephone lineman boots, and they were wearing wool Army surplus socks. And those socks were horrible. For one thing, there are these bushes in the desert they call pucka bushes, and they would catch on those and then just unravel. Plus, they were smelly. You couldn't really wash them. They were wool. And we happened to find these beautiful cotton soccer socks down in a sporting goods store in Tijuana, and they were beautiful. And we bought 20 pair for $1 a piece, and that's how we started JT, with $20 worth of socks. And we took them out. We had a foot mannequin that when John would take off on his Hare and Hound, I would put it on the hood of the truck, and I would sell socks until he came through to get gas, and then I'd have to stop and gas him, and then he'd take off again, and we'd end up kind of paying our way. The reason that we did that was because John was a pharmacist, and he was racing every weekend, and every weekend he either bent a fender, or he bent a handlebar, or he ruined a clutch or a brake or a foot peg or something. And so our accountant came in one day and he said, John, you either have to get good enough to be a pro, or you're going to have to find some little business so you can write all this expense off. And so that's why we went to TJ and bought 20 pairs of socks. Yep, there's the pharmacy.
I have a picture here, and it looks like it was. And that's the van you all went to the races in?
That's correct.
Or is this the van after JT had? Okay. And where was this, Rita? There's a sign on the building. What does it say there?
Well, it says Bonita Valley Pharmacy, I believe. And that had to be before 1974, because we only ran that pharmacy from 70 to 73. So we started selling those socks probably pretty close to 1970. And we had 3 products in the drugstore. We had drugs, we had dog food, and we had JT socks. And we ran the mail order business out of behind the counter. I'd go down every day and go to the mailbox, box 10 Bonita, and I would pick up the mail and come to the pharmacy and fill the orders and send out the mail orders. And that's how that all started. I want to thank our sponsor,
Motion. I want to thank our sponsor, Motion Pro, for giving us support over the years. There's a 20% discount across the board at E9135. That's MP on everything they have there except custom cables. My guest tonight is Rita Ruth Gregory. Rita, I understand that you did get some help from some people along the way with the socks. Torsten Hallman was one of them. How'd Torsten help you out?
Well, Torsten and Lars Larson and Birgitta Berlin had come over from Sweden to import the Swedish products. You know, they had the Swedish goatskin leathers. They had boots. They had, I don't remember their entire line, but they were dealing direct with dealers. And John and I just started out selling through mail order because, you know, we had to do something. And Lars, I think Lars approached John and asked him if they could carry our socks. And so that's how we got to know Torsten and Lars and Birgitta and a lot of others, Klaus Nielsen and Kent Olin and so many others. And all the writers that we met in Sweden were through them. You know, we met Torsten or Torleif Hansen. I wrote it down so I wouldn't forget anybody.
Yeah.
Rolf Tivlin was there at that time too. He was with Husqvarna at the time, and Torsten and Lars and Birgitta had their business, and Håkan Andersson was along with Joel Robert, were the first two writers that we really contracted. And then Torliff came over later, and we met him and became friends with Torliff. So we really started our business with the Swedish writers, actually, because at that time American writers weren't really involved.
Yeah. After the socks, Rita, you did get some help, as you mentioned, from Torsten Holman. I believe you gave Joel Robert a sponsorship, which was all the socks he could use and $100 a year.
Yeah.
What was your first major piece of equipment after the socks? What did you have made? Where was it made?
Well, I think after we had the socks and those rugby jerseys, the biggest thing that happened was one day we were sitting in our offices and a semi truck drove up, and they had a container load of motocross pants made out of nylon and leather.
Ah.
And we did not know what that was, but we had a really good friend in Finland whose name is Juha Tiranen. And Juha had developed with Koho, which is a hockey manufacturing company, he had developed these pants that were made out of nylon with leather knees and a leather butt. And they were lighter weight and they were nicer, especially in the desert, to wear. And they had sent it to, I believe it was sent to Husqvarna, and Husky had denied the shipment. They didn't want them and they were going to send them back. So Tiranen told a co-host, said, don't send them back. Don't pay the freight back. Just take them down to John and Rita. And they gave us, well, basically they told us to pay them if we could sell them. And they really acted as our bank. We owe a lot to Finland and Sweden for the beginning of our business.
How long, Rita, before you had to actually have a warehouse? Because from what I understand, I think the bathroom of that pharmacy was kind of like a warehouse for a little while.
Well, it wasn't the bathroom yet. It was just a dirt floored storage room, but we didn't have room in the pharmacy. We started getting orders. We started getting a lot of orders through the mail order, and we didn't have room in our pharmacy to store the shipments that came in from Mexico. So next door was this little restaurant, and they had a back room, and we rented that. But in 1973, we had a 3-year lease on that pharmacy. And in 1973, John decided to shut the pharmacy down and do this full time. And so in 1973, we rented a real, I think it was 800 square feet in National City, California. And that was our first real warehouse and offices. But our license was 1970. We started our business in 1970. But it took 3 years for us to really get there full time.
So the clothing line took off to the point of where a very, I would imagine, lucrative career as a pharmacist took a back seat to selling motocross gear, huh?
He quit. He did some relief work for a while, but he decided, this was what we were going to do. So we kind of jumped in, ignorance is bliss. So we kind of jumped into that.
Yeah. And sometimes, things line up and just at the right time. We don't always know what we're doing, but somehow some amazing things happen. A mutual friend of ours, a person a lot of people know and like, an OSA guru, so to speak, Keith Linus. Keith Linus, I was on the phone with him the other day he's in Scotland right now, or Belfast, actually. And he said that he was one of your first employees. Why don't you tell me a little bit about the early days with Keith, Doug Mello, and some other people that you employed in the early days at JT Racing?
Well, when we reached the point that we needed help, we hired Doug Mello because Doug had been our delivery boy at the pharmacy, and Keith the rascal had also been Doug's best friends. John had bought one of the very first Honda cars, which was a little bitty boxy thing that had a 600cc motorcycle engine in it, and that was our delivery car. And we turned Doug and Keith loose with that car, and later on found out that Doug lived at the top of a hill, and so when they would take the car and come down to the pharmacy, they would do front end wheelies coming all the way down the hill. But so when we moved to the warehouse, the first people, of course, we thought of were Doug and Keith, and we needed someone in the office. And I asked Doug if he knew any smart girls that, that he had gone to school with. And he said, I do. Her name is Gail Jeffries. And Gail was just a real blessing. And she worked there for more than 20 years. And she got married. I think she goes now by Gail Richards, and she works for a distributor somewhere. I can't remember the name of the distributorship.
Okay.
But Doug, Keith, Gail, and then we hired another Bonita kid named Eric Berg, who was the warehouse manager. And for a long time, it was just kind of the 5 or 6 of us.
I want to thank Tom McAllister and Full Circle Racing for being a sponsor of our show for like 3 years now. Tom's got a special going on, 18, 19, and 21-inch wheels, $775. That's a brand new rim, new spokes and nipples, laced and trued. That also includes you sending him your hubs, which he will bead blast, and then powder coat. Put them back on your bike, and just $775. My guest this evening is Rita Ruth Gregory. We're talking about the years at JT Racing. So the gear, actually, a lot of it was made, as you mentioned, in Sweden.
Finland.
Was anything made here in the States? Were you, I for some reason, picture 40 people on sewing machines making jerseys, but maybe that's not necessarily so. So was anything made here in America for the JT line?
Not originally. T-shirts, of course, were made here, and eventually we got into jerseys that were not from New Zealand. We got into cotton jerseys, but in the beginning we worked with the Finns, and the first company was Coho, and then they quit doing it, and we worked with a company called Sinisalo for a while. But what happened eventually is that it became so expensive with the exchange rate. It depended on the fluctuation of the dollar. And we started having people copy the pants, and they didn't have to design them or anything. And they went to I don't know if they went to Mexico or they went to China, but we had to compete. So we started sewing in our own facility in National City. And eventually we decided to move the factory to Mexico. So we moved the factory to Tijuana, and we had a really great employee named Militon Gonzalez. And he ran that factory for many years, maybe, I don't know if it was 20 years, but it was close. And so we had what they call a maquiladora, and the pants were cut and kitted in Chula Vista, where we had our facility, and they were assembled in Mexico. So we would take the pieces across the border. We were only about 5 miles from the border, and we would take the pieces across the border, and they would assemble them and bring them back across. And the reason for that was, if you had them cut and sewn in Mexico, you had to label them made in Mexico, which was a higher duty. If we cut them in California and sent the pieces down, they could be labeled assembled in Mexico, and the duty was much, much, much less. So it saved our cost, and it saved the customer's cost to have them made there. and it worked out very well. We eventually expanded. We made our gloves there. We made, I think we assembled shoulder pads down there. We made goggles there. They were great at doing goggles. And it was a really nice relationship, and Milliton was the key to that.
Rita, you were just talking about how many employees you had working for you. Some of the names we wouldn't recognize from everyday life, but as longtime motocross enthusiasts, you had some other guys whose names we would recognize. One of the most beloved names, one of the most successful careers that ended far too soon. David Bailey worked for JT, did he not?
He sure did. And he's a gifted designer. He designed one of our best logos. It's the one that kind of looks like it has a surf wave around it. I believe that was,
oh yeah,
I can't remember, maybe the late 80s that David worked there for quite some time. And but also Danny Laporte worked there for a while. A guy named Rich Thorson worked there for a while. And then the indomitable Marty Tripes worked for us quite a while. So we had good relationships with the riders that we worked with.
Yeah. Rita, you had a stable, and I have to say stable. You had a stable of handsome young guys that all represented JT. It was absolutely an incredible time. Everybody wore JT gear. You had so many riders that were winning national championships here, winning some really, really big races. And then in 1981, you had Johnny O'Mara, Donnie Hansen, Danny Laporte, of course, and Chuck Sun. They won the motocross donations and the trophy donations.
That's right.
With them wearing your gear, and now on this international platform, how did that change sales for JT? Did it change it at all?
Oh, it was amazing. I mean, we were already working with people in Europe and also in Japan, but those types of results basically made the customers come to them, and they were by nature, required to have the product because that was what the customers were wanting. And so, yes, of course it did. It helped it a lot. And sometimes we picked up new distributors because of it. And sometimes it just made the ordering more efficient and bigger. So we actually ended up having an export department. So that happened because of Americans coming into their own. In the beginning, when we started, it was Europeans, and the Americans were not as competitive as they became with that second generation. After Roger DeCoster and Joel Robert and Garrett, after they reached retirement, we ended up with a group of riders, starting out with Marty Smith, of course, that became internationally well known.
Yeah. We're going to take a little break here with a segment of our show called What's It Worth? We'll be right back with more Rita Roof Gregory. In our Moto Showcase segment tonight, we take a look at a 1977 KTM 400 that was sent in to us by Paul Griffin of Monterey, California. In our Moto Showcase segment tonight, we take a look at a 1977 KTM 400 that was sent in to us by Paul Griffin of Monterey, California. There's a picture of Paul flanked by Brad Lackey and Brock Glover. Paul writes, I purchased this bike from Lars Larson, and of course, I complimented him on the restoration. Lars explained to me that I don't know how that went off. I don't think it went off so well. Rita, I remember hearing you say one time that if you had 500 burlap bags, all you had to do was put a picture of Marty Smith wearing a burlap bag and you'd sell every one of them. Tell us about your memories of Marty and Nancy Smith.
Marty was the Brad Pitt of motocross. He was amazing. He was a humble guy, a simple guy, really. He loved to be home. He didn't like traveling all that much, but he loved to ride motorcycles, and he was really good at it. And he was just his parents were the salt of the earth. They were just the most gentle people, and Marty came from that stock. And he was just, he was just famous. He was good looking. He rode for Honda, so he always had that red, white, and blue at a time when America was becoming, well, in this picture, it's not red, white, and blue, but that sold a lot of product.
Yeah.
I think a lot of women bought that for their husbands for Christmas. But he was great, and he was always humble. He just would come down and be one of the guys, at work, and he'd always show up for photo shoots, and he rode very well. And Nancy was a real sweetheart. They truly were a couple that loved each other, and she was always kind of, I think of her as his meerkat. If you ever see pictures of Marty and Nancy together, she's always either holding his hand, or she has her hand in front of him, or she's standing. There's one picture where she's standing with her hands on her hips. And I swear it had to be at Carlsbad with that photo, because you could tell it was between motos, and I guarantee you it was like 100 degrees that day. And he was sitting in this beach chair, whipped. And Nancy was standing there with her hands on her hips, daring anybody to come near him. He needed to rest after a 40-minute moto in 100-degree heat, and she was going to smack down anybody that got in the way. She was a character, and she was a lot of fun.
Rita, you also had some interesting names for some of your products. You had the Flex On glove, the Pro Tour jersey, the Mouth Trap mouth guard. Who was coming up with the names for some of these products?
Well, I came up with some of them. John came up with some of them. We had people in our design department that came up with some of them. But a lot of times I did come up with some of the names. And Marty Tripes and I came up with a couple at one time, but that was a paintball product. But I don't know. It was something that I felt like I could do. And sometimes you get a good idea out of the circus.
Yeah, I guess that's a good way to put it. Two standout sets of gear that will always remain. And of course, Brock Glover, when he wore that pink gear at Anaheim. Were the color patterns that became popular in the late 80s, was that your idea again, or was that part of the design team?
Well, the design team was really good at that. And I'm trying to recall if it was Chris Dawson or Mark Blanchard that came up with the Dalmatian. But that was a big hit. And it was one way to get Ronnie Lachine down for a photo shoot, because he loved puppies. And if we had puppies, he would show up. And his name was Lachine, which in French is the dog. And so we called him the Dogger, and brought these little baby Dalmatians down. And it was a classic. And then Brock was the reluctant pink rider. That was a good story, because at the LA Coliseum, I don't remember who decided on pink. It wasn't me. It might have been John. It might have been somebody, and it might have been the nylon fabric salesman, for all I know. But we designed this beautiful pink outfit, and John wanted him to ride that at the LA Coliseum Supercross. And Brock said, no, I can't do that, because the guys from Japan Yamaha are going to be there, and they might not like that. So they had a race that was after the race was over. I can't remember what it was, but it was some kind of a race for money. And it was after the main event. And so John said, okay, Brock, you're going to wear it for this race. And he did. And I'll never forget when the race started and Brock got the whole shot. I watched the stadium, and as the camera moved around the stadium, it was like, you know how people do the wave? It was like a wave. People were pointing, look, look. And you could watch as soon as he was going around, the arms would come down, look. And the next day or Monday, the phone was ringing off the hook. That was an amazing event.
For the pink gear?
For the pink gear.
Yeah. So you sold it. I guess you sold a lot of that. John was telling me too that at one point you had an overstocked pants that were in blue and yellow. You weren't selling them, and Bob Hanna wore them at Anaheim. You had 500 of them on Sunday. You had none left by Wednesday.
But I also want to say that Brock Glover was our pink model for the pink outfit in the USA. But in Europe, it was Jackie Vimon, the world champion.
Yes.
And Jackie was as famous in France and in Europe as Brock was here in the USA. And Jackie sold a lot of pants for us too. So he was just the best guy, and he sold a lot of JT product for us.
And didn't David also wear an orange and blue outfit from JT at one point too?
David, I think picked that out, and I remember David saying, this color is God. And he loved it. You know, he just loved that color, and it looked really great on him. And who was the other guy, the famous desert racer, Larry Rossler? Yes. He wore a lot of our enduro stuff. You know, probably in the 80s, we started putting a little card in all of our products is to check off who was your favorite rider and who was this and that. And in motocross, it came back David Bailey. And in enduro, it came back Larry Rossler. And Larry sold a lot of our enduro stuff. But also Bob Hanna, and this was John's idea, Bob Hanna sold a lot. He had the Superman jersey and then the lightning bolts. And one Christmas Eve, or no, it was one Christmas Day, after we'd opened all the presents, we took the kids to see a new movie called Superman. And when that movie got out, he said, I just had the greatest idea. We're going to make Bob a Superman outfit, and we're going to put an H where the S is, and we're going to do all that. And that sold, that was John's idea. That sold a lot, and the lightning bolt as well.
Yeah,
so,
I had a feeling this was going.
Bob was another one that did an amazing job for us. He was a great sponsored rider.
I'm going to ask you. It's kind of a personal question, but at the height of it all with JT, do you have any idea what your gross sales were on some of your best years?
Oh, I would say. When it was, if you're referring to only motocross, probably, I don't know, maybe a couple million, two and a half million a year until maybe the 90s when it got better. But it depended, you know, it's a very seasonal product. So you go heavy in the summer and the fall, and then, you know, the winter completely drops off. And except maybe in California, Texas, and Florida, and, you know, the southern states. But we also sold a lot of, we also sold a lot of other markets, including BMX, mountain biking, and even some snowboard goggles. So we tried to fill in those seasons as best we could. Okay.
We are going to take a little break here, Rita, and hear from our sponsor, Vintco. We'll be right back with more Rita Roof.
Vinco, who already has a full line of vintage parts, now has air shocks that are an exact duplicate of the original air shocks so popular in the late 70s. So whether you're looking to build a full racer or museum showpiece, these shocks will give you that incredible 70s look and improve your bike's performance. These new air shocks are fully rebuildable with Vinco rebuild kits, and all shocks are hand assembled in the USA with all new components. Every component is brand new. Just like the originals, our air shocks are adjustable with 2 chambers, high and low pressure, giving you tremendous flexibility for settings of your bike suspension. The Vinco air shocks come fully assembled and ready for installation. Just add air or nitrogen. The kits include the manual and spacers. Visit Vinco.com to check out the air shocks and all that Vinco has to offer to help you get back on track and to keep that ride going.
Vinco always has some great specials going on. Rod kits, piston kits, get over to Vinco.com. They have over 2,000 products in their catalog. My guest tonight is Rita Gregory. We're talking about the years at JT and so many things that went on there. Your ex-husband, John, was, or still is, quite the pilot. Did you have any interest in flying as well, Rita?
Well, not like John did. John had a passion for flying from childhood. I flew. I took lessons, okay? I took lessons. I learned how to take off, fly level, and land, because I told John, if you have a heart attack, I'm landing this son of a gun. So I learned how to do that, but it wasn't a passion for me like it was for John. And but I enjoyed flying. I did enjoy flying.
During my research, I discovered that it was JT Racing that was sold in 2000, I believe. Yes. And it states that John and Rita retired. You don't strike me as the retirement type, especially 23 years ago. Were there more mountains to climb, Rita, or did you just really pack up and retire?
Well, you know, truth is stranger than fiction. And we had a business consultant when we were at JT, and he was an older man, and John didn't like that part of the business. He didn't like the banking, the insurance, all of that stuff that you have to do. And so He would send these people into my office. And this man and I got to be pretty good friends. And when we sold JT, I called him and I told him that we'd sold it. And I said, and at the time I was like 54 years old. And I said, if anything comes up, John, his name was John also, give me a call because I'm bored. And one Thanksgiving, I was on my way up to the desert in Ridgecrest, California to see my sister, and my phone rang, and it was this man, and he said, Rita, I have something, and I think you know the guy. And as it turned out, it was this guy that we had approached at one time in Mexico to make our pants, which didn't work out, but we had met him. And he said he's going to open a destination thing and make rum and have a tasting room and blah, blah, blah. And I said, well, John, I don't drink. And he said, well, just give him a call. And so that was in Thanksgiving, and I didn't call, and I hem-hawed around. And about February, I was getting really bored. So I thought, what the heck, I'll call him. And he said, just get on a plane and come over here. And so I did. And he took me to the warehouse that he had rented down by the harbor. Right. It was probably 20 by 20 by 20, and opened the door, and all he had was like a 20-foot stack of sugar. And I said, are you going to make rum or cupcakes? What are we doing here? But we visited for, I guess I stayed over there maybe about a week. And one night we were going to go out to dinner, and he was going to bring his wife, and he showed up by himself. And he said, well, she's sick. I think she's got the flu, and she stayed home. So I didn't think much about that. And then I went home, and that was in February. And in May, he called me back and he said, Rita, we're coming to San Diego I'm taking Yolanda to the doctor in San Diego. She's still sick. And I said, she's still sick from February? And as it turned out, she had cancer and she didn't live but about another month. And so I told him, I said, well, if you need help, I can help. And, just let me know if you need help. And sure enough, he called me and I started going over there about, 6 weeks at a time. And I helped organize the employees, and I supervised the building of the tasting room. And I made the recipe for the rum cake that we sell. So I was over there and invested in that company. And I'm still waiting to get some money out of it, but we're doing fairly well. We're just reinvesting all the money right now.
And what's the name of the rum cake in case we see it? What's the name of the cake?
Koloa, Koloa, not what's the other one? Anyway, it's Koloa.
Kahlua, not Kahlua.
Not
Right.
Kahlua. It's Koloa, and it means tall cane. And we've got some really great rums. I mean, really great. We make a coffee rum that I put over ice cream. It's so good. It's really good. And next time you're down, I'll bring you a bottle.
I would appreciate that very much.
We have about 8 rums now, and we have some pre-mixed drinks. I think we have a pre-mixed Mai Tai and a fruit punch, and I can't remember the other. And now we've come out with those little spritzers that the college kids, like White Claw and all those. We have 3 of those. We have 3 of those, and I think mango and passion fruit and maybe coconut. I can't remember, but we've got a great product line. I'm really proud of the product line.
We've talked about a lot of different people from around the world, racers, husbands. I know you have a couple of children and some grandchildren, Rita. Can you tell us a little bit about with them and how they keep you busy?
Well, I have 2 daughters. I have Rhonda, who is an owner of a paintball company named Dye, and she has 3 children. Osi, who is my oldest grandchild, then Kaya, who is in the university at Santa Barbara, and Dakota, who is at the University of Oregon. And then I have Laura, who she's my free spirit. She lived and worked in Italy, and then she came back here and worked, and then she went to London for about 10 years. And during the pandemic, her company laid off a lot of people, and she moved home because without a job, she really couldn't afford to stay in her flat it was like a year. And now she's here in San Diego, and she's found a really good job, and I'm happy to have her back. So that's my 5.
Rita, an hour has gone by so quickly and we've covered so much, but I was just wondering now, with just a few minutes left, if there's anything that we've missed or maybe something that came to mind after we got started. Now would be a great time to cover it. In fact, you know what? There's something that I forgot here, and I forgot to bring it up. There's a picture of you and John being inducted into the AMA Hall of Fame.
That's right. That was in 2010.
Yeah.
And I think that was thanks in large part to Brock Glover. I think he really stood up for us and got that through. And he, I was so proud of him. In 2010, the outfit he's wearing in this picture, that was his original outfit when he was racing. He was still in the same shape that he was back when he was a racer. And that's amazing to me.
Really?
Yeah, that's amazing.
Wow. Well,
Brock is
there anything else for you?
I would like to give a shout out a little bit to we talk about these wonderful products and we give John and Rita all the credit, but we had a secret weapon. We had a secret weapon.
That?
Well, even before we filed for a business license, we worked with this young guy named Jerry Parks. And he designed, in the beginning, he was just airbrushing T-shirts for us to sell out of the truck alongside the socks. And he would, do Barstow Vegas shirts, and he would do whatever. And he went to art center to school. And when he got out of that, we hired him. And he worked for John and I for more than 30 years. And then he worked for my daughter for 15. And he's very, very talented. And our whole design department revolved around him. He was amazing. He was amazing. So thank you, Jerry, if you ever get to see this.
This morning, away from Scotland, and he said, have Rita tell you the story about sneaking the children into Carlsbad. And it was kind of cryptic like that, so I don't know what it really means, but is there a funny story about you sneaking your daughters into a race?
I thought about that when Ricky Johnson was talking to Larry Grismer at the Carlsbad reunion, and how Larry had busted Ricky for sneaking in. And I wanted to say to Larry, yeah, I did that too, but you never caught me. Well, it seemed like it didn't matter what we did, how many riders we hired, how much gear we gave away, how much we advertised. We could never get enough pit passes to get our family in. And so Carlsbad GP was coming up, and I had to take the kids. And so I didn't know how we were going to get them in. But at the time, we were importing Pirelli tires, and Lars Larson offered to take the tires to Carlsbad for us in his van. And so we get up to Carlsbad, and I had the two kids, and I only had 2 pit passes. I only had one for John, and I only had one for myself. And I said, I don't know how we're going to get these kids in. And Lars says, you just put one in one stack of tires and the other in the other stack of tires. And Rita, I get out of the van, I walk across, and you drive, and if they try to stop you, you just blew the horn at them. And that's exactly what we did. So I didn't have to blow the horn, though, but I just drove across that gate.
Great story, Rita, and I'm sure there are so many, many more. Maybe someday we'll...
oh, my God. There are a lot of more stories. There are a lot of funnies. You know, the one thing that's been a blessing about this company is, you meet so many people that have become friends. And if you love what you're doing, you never do a day's work. And JT, we did work on the days that we did stuff we didn't want to do. But the crux of our business was a joy. And thank you to all of the people watching that bought our gear, and to the ones that helped us do certain things. I just can't thank people enough.
Yeah. Rita, thank you for taking the time to speak with us tonight. And I hope I see you at an event soon. I just saw you a few weeks ago at the Carlsbad reunion, but I won't forget that Larry Grismer story and how you got one over on the Grizz.
And I'd like to give a shout out to Scott and Debbie Burnworth, because without them, we would not be reliving a lot of this historical stuff. And they do this pro bono. They don't make any money at this. And I just hope that people understand what a great job they're doing for the sport by keeping the history alive.
Yeah. In fact, this is a great time to mention that they have a race coming up. This show is on the 18th. They have a race coming up this weekend, the 21st.
Exactly. At Glen Helen, I believe.
At Glen Helen. That's where I think it is, Rita. So,
yeah, I think so.
Thank you again. And if there's anything else, you give me a call, but I hope to see you soon. I'm going to make you stand by that promise of the bottle of rum. I'm going to make a special trip down there to get it.
Okay. I'll do that.
Thanks so much. Thanks so much,
Okay.
Rita.
Thank you.
Rita Roof Gregory. I want to thank Rita for being my guest tonight on Vintage Motocross Q&A. She sure had some good stories to tell us, and I'm sure there are so many more. Right now, we're going to take a break. We're going to hear from Motion Pro, then we'll be back to wrap it up. Hey, it's Joe Abadi for Vintage Motocross Q&A. When you're replacing a cylinder or a gasket or doing a top end on your bike, many times it's very difficult to get to the nuts that are on the base. And you want to be sure that you torque those evenly whenever you change a top end. Motion Pro has come up with this great tool. It's the torque adapter, okay? You can put any size wrench in there and you can tighten it up. On the back is a 3/8 drive. You can put your torque wrench in there, get the wrench on the nut that's on the base of your cylinder, and make sure everything is torqued evenly. This is a great tool. I have one in the shop. We use it all the time. It comes with instructions as well. Go see your local dealer or get to motionpro.com. And don't forget, go over to Vintage Motocross Q&A to get a 20% discount on all Motion. In our Moto Showcase segment tonight, we take a look at a 1977 KTM 400. That was sent in to us. Our show tonight with announcements. What do we got coming up this week? Oh, we've got not this week, but in January, we've got the York Swap Meet coming up. That's in York, Pennsylvania, January 21st. I'll be there along with a lot of other great guests. Don't forget, reserve a booth now. Reserve a booth now. They were sold out last year. That's the York Swap Meet at the York Fairgrounds in York, Pennsylvania. I want to thank Mike Chamberlain for being a supporter of the show. A little bit different than a sponsor, a little less expensive, but it does help us put on a quality show here at Vintage Motocross Q&A. Thank you, Mike Chamberlain. At the end of the month, just a couple of weeks away. Today's the 18th. Wow, next Friday. I leave for Ruther Glen, Virginia. I will be there at the Moto Barn in Ruther Glen, Virginia. George Ackerman is putting on a great event down there for the third year in a row. I will be there along with Martina Faltova-Cope, Don Kadowski, Warren Reed, Steve Wise, Gary Bailey will be there, and I think we're expecting some other surprises too, some other vendors that are going to be showing up there with some of their goods. I believe ReplicaMotorcycleParts.com will be there, Paul Parkinson Sr. For tonight, that wraps it up for this episode of Vintage Motocross Q&A. I want to thank Rita Roof Gregory again. Don't forget to keep sharing the show. And tomorrow on the page, we'll have a random share giveaway winner. We'll have a sticker sheet for you, compliments of Vinco.com. This is Joe. Thanks for joining me. We'll see you next time.